Hey there, woodworkers. For this project, I'm going to be making a small bookshelf. Before I get started, what I've got here are my set of plans. And then, like with almost any of my projects, I like to carry around a 6-inch steel ruler, a pencil, a tape measure, a tri-square, and a calculator. To keep these videos relatively short, I'm going to divide it up into multiple videos. And in each video, I'll show you either a different part or an assembly for this project. So this is part 1. To start my project, I need to look at my bill of materials and select some wood. So let's go do that. When you're selecting material, the first thing that you want to look at on your cut list is your rough widths that you need. Hardwood comes in different widths, and so if you can find a piece that's wide enough, then that's great. If there's not a piece that's wide enough, then you may have to glue up to get the width that you need. So here I've got a piece of sapele that I think will work for all of my pieces. As I look at my cut list, I can see that the widest piece that I need is 7 1/4 at a rough width. And the board that I've selected here is just under 8 inches wide. So I'm going to go ahead and see how many of my different parts I can rough cut out of this board. I'm going to start on the upcut saw, and I'm going to cut 1 inch or so off the end of the board just to make sure that I don't have any cracks. And from there, I'm going to start rough cutting out my parts. I'm just going to hang the board over the cutting line just a little bit. I don't necessarily have to measure exactly 1 inch or so. Okay, I take a look at the end, and I'm looking for cracks, and I kind of feel, and this looks good and it feels good. So I've got a good end, and I'm going to go ahead and start rough cutting the lengths for my parts. Okay, so there's my sides. Now we'll go for my shelves that I need 13 inches rough length. Okay, so I was almost able to get all of my parts out of that one board. I just needed a couple extra. So I went over and looked among my short offcuts, and I was able to pick up a couple of those pieces. So now I've got a couple different stacks of boards. And so it's important, while this is still fresh in my mind, I'm going to go through and label each of those boards so that I know which part that's for. Okay, 20.5. This is the back. Okay, this is sides, or let's see, shelf. Okay, so these are sides. This is feet. And this is back. Top. So if you take a look, I've labeled all my different parts. I went ahead and rough cut those each based on my cut list. So now I've got everything I need here, and now I'll just start working through the procedure and creating these parts. I highly recommend that you take some notes as you go, and that you kind of check off as you complete each part. That way, when you leave and come back the next time to work on it, you know exactly where you left off and where to start from. So our procedure is telling us that we want to build the feet first. So I'm going to flip to my page that shows me the design for the feet, and we'll get started on that. All right, so after selecting wood and cross-cutting to get our rough length, this is telling me to plane to 10 to 11/16. current thickness is 1 1/16. So that's what I'll set my planer to. Okay, so this board had a pretty bad twist in it. So I actually went and jointed one face on the jointer until that's nice and flat. So now I'm gonna run it through the planer and get the rest of my thickness down. Okay, it was planing pretty cleanly, so I went ahead and planed to 10/16, but my final thickness is gonna be 9/16, so now I'm gonna go over to the wide belt sander for that. Nine sixteenths is 0.56, and 10/16 is 0.625. Okay, so I'll start at 0.62. So I've got it on inches, set 0.62. I'm gonna give myself a little pencil mark so that I can keep track of when the face is clean. Okay, I'm gonna stop at 0.57, which is slightly thicker than we need, but we can always take off more later if we need. All right, the next step, we're heading over to the jointer. Both these edges look relatively straight, so I'm just going to choose one and joint the edge. Okay, so joint an edge and check for square. This is always a good time to just double check. Okay, and it looks like I'm square, so I'm good to go. But if I had a problem, I'd want to fix it right then. So now we're headed to the table saw. Okay, rip to 1 inch, which is the final width. And I'll be careful to put my jointed edge towards the rip fence. Double check my blade height. Set my fence at 1 inch. Let me go grab a push stick. There we go. Okay, I happen to have enough width to get 2, so I went ahead and cut that, and so I'll just have extras in case something goes wrong with one of these. Okay, next we want to check the ends for square, and if they're not, then we can square those. Okay, so check that end and it's square, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little check mark on that one. Go to my other one as well. That end is not square, but I'm gonna try the other side. This one is square, so I'll put a check mark here. If none of the ends are square, then I need to cross cut off just a little bit to square that up. Now I can cut these to final lengths. And I'll make sure to put my good square end in first so that that's the end that I keep. Okay, so these feet are going to be relatively small, and I do have quite a bit extra, enough for probably 6 more. So I always keep my offcuts and hold on to them until the end of a project, because you never know when you're going to need an extra little piece that's already been milled and squared like these ones have been. Okay, next step. So we've completed milling and squaring our feet now. Now we'll go to cut the joinery. First thing is you want to determine the orientation, which on this doesn't matter because this is pretty straight grained and they look really good all over. But if there happened to be a defect or something nice that you wanted to display, then you can choose the orientation based on that. Okay, now we're going over to the router. Okay, so the next step is to use the router table to cut a groove into the feet. So first I'm going to change out and get my correct routing bit in. Okay, let me explain what I've got set up here. So it took me a couple minutes to get this all set up and measured correctly. I have a 3/8 diameter cutter, and it is 1/4 of an inch high, so that gives us the correct size groove. I've set up a feather board to help keep it in place so that my fingers don't have to be close to that. And then the important part is I set up a stop block here so that I get the 6.25 length groove, and that leaves an inch for the front of the foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on, I'm going to make the cut, and then as soon as I hit the stop block, I'll turn it off and wait for it to spin down. Okay, that's kind of what we're going for. Okay, I'm satisfied with the way that these look. Okay, my next step is I need to take a little chisel and just chisel out the corners here. Okay, those are both looking pretty good, and we can adjust those as needed as well once we finish the other parts. Now I'm going to lay out this little curve on the front of the foot. It's telling me that it's 3/4 inch from the front of the toe. So I'll go ahead and mark that. And it comes down, and it looks like it's 9/32 from the top. So I'll go ahead and mark that. This doesn't have to be perfect. It could just be done by eye, but we'll go ahead and do the best we can. Now we just need a little bit of an arc, and a lot of times I'll just go ahead and grab the nearest roll of tape because it usually ends up being a nice radius. And I'm going to match up those marks and draw myself just a really slight radius. Do the same thing on the other foot. Okay, now that I've got both of those laid out, we're going to go over to the bandsaw. I'm going to use the bandsaw to just kind of nip these corners a little bit, save myself a little bit of sanding. This is such a small area that I probably could just go straight to the sander, but that's okay. So you can see on these, I cut close to but not on my line, and then I'm going to go over on the sander and try to perfectly sand it to that line. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it just kind of makes that front end just look a little bit better than having it square. All right, we're done with the feet. The only thing left would be to give it a final sanding and also just to double check the fit to the sides once we've completed those. The next video, we'll be making the sides.